Most likely the cause of the decline was loss of habitat, in particular in the northern part of their range, in areas where they started building up.
It's not too late to look at those open spaces and strategize how we can weave them back together again.
Our job at the Department of Fish and Game is for this animal to reach recovery levels. And that means that we have enough sheep here in the peninsular ranges that they're self-sustaining. In order for them to reach these numbers, we need to be able to monitor their status, their distribution, and survivorship. Can they go from an area where they need to obtain forage to another area where they need to obtain water, to another area where they maybe need to have their lambs? That's a safe area. We go out every other year on even years, and we fly helicopter throughout the range, and we count sheep. We see how many sheep we have out there. And by doing that, we can tell if their numbers are increasing or decreasing, or if they're staying the same. And then the other thing we do is on odd number years, we go out and we actually, with a helicopter again, we capture sheep and we place radio collars on them. I can use telemetry to go out to actually find them, and I can see individuals. And also by having radio collars on them, it's a method for us to count their numbers. It's called mark recapture, mark recite. So when we go out and fly in our helicopters and we count sheep, we see how many sheep don't have collars, and we count how many sheep we see that have collars. And we take those two numbers and we plug it into a formula, and it gives us an estimate of their population. So those are just methods that we use in order to monitor their status, their distribution, and their survival.
We are purchasing land. Organizations like the Anza-Borrego Foundation are purposefully looking at these corridor connectivity areas. There are groups throughout California, Nature Conservancy and the Resources Legacy Fund Foundation in Sacramento, that are really targeting these movement corridors, these open valleys that maybe nobody thought of as vital habitat to these species that live in the islands on each side. So we designate a wilderness 100,000 acres in a mountain range. But when we really look back on the history of that mountain range, we find that many of the natural water sources, the springs, the seeps, the streams that existed, have actually been taken over by human activities. So one case in point right here in Anza-Borrego, mountain range had 6 natural water sources that were available to wildlife and to unique plant communities that lived there. And through the gold rush, through the cattle industry, through agriculture, the establishment of roads and railroads, systematically those 6 water sources were all taken almost to the exclusive use by humans, excluding use by many forms of wildlife, including desert bighorn sheep. So we looked at that mountain range and we said, well, we can't remove a state highway from this creek, but maybe what we could do also is establish these water systems known as guzzlers in remote areas of the wilderness to pay back those 6 water sources that we humans took from that mountain range and from the wildlife. So we create a system that collects rainwater on a large plastic apron, about 1,000 square feet. Rain falls and hits this camouflage plastic structure and flows down into a collector and is stored in large water tanks, and then is metered out through a float valve system to a small drinker box that wildlife can use.
And in those areas, they're very remote and hard to get to. We've placed remote cameras that are focused on the guzzler, so every time a sheep comes to get some water, it takes a photograph of that animal. We can see their health, we can see if they look sick or if they look healthy, and we can actually count how many sheep come to these areas by looking at these photographs. Bighorn sheep, they're a charismatic species. They're not any more important than the amphibians or the insects that we find out here. And if we can save those animals, if we can become aware of how important they are, we're also going to save the habitat that they live in, which is the same areas that we find those snakes and those spiders and those amphibians and frogs and lizards. Why is it important? It's a good question. We need to decide if that's important, because we're the cause of these animals losing their habitat and for their numbers going down. I mean, the good thing is that since we're the cause of it, we can be the solution.